You're being hijacked. Saboteurs are the negative thought patterns that you have. The reason why it's called a saboteur is because they sabotage your performance and your relationships. My strongest being the hyper-rational means that I intellectualize things. I'm pushing my emotions down because it's too messy. My job is to help individuals gain clarity around their desire for their life experience. And that's going to include perhaps their sense of purpose, values, skills and talents, and getting in touch with their authentic self. Husband and I became more involved caregivers to our aging parents. As local people, we have a much bigger view of generations. Keiki really benefit from interaction with the kupuna, and the kupuna really benefit from the interaction of their adult children who care for them. Engage with something challenging that's going to help you grow. You actually do need a little bit of that kind of stress stimulation. It's when the stress becomes chronic that it becomes a problem. It was hard for organizations to wrap their head around, well, what's both? I was helping organizations with raising productivity, developing their leaders, and bringing wellness to them all together. I discovered functional medicine, a medical approach that looks for root cause of disease and disorder instead of addressing symptoms. So that was really attractive to me, and that's how I wanted to approach my own health.
Greater Good Radio, Connect, Learn, Heal, and Grow is brought to you by Brain Gain Hawaii, a boutique executive recruiting, career development, and coaching firm. Learn more at braingainhi.com. Welcome to Greater Good Radio. Today's guest is Robin Stueber, the principal and founder of People-Centered Leadership. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Evan. Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you. So, People-Centered Leadership is a coaching firm, correct?
Yes, and more.
Okay.
So I started as an executive wellness coach and worked with a lot of people one-on-one. But through my network locally, through business, I started acquiring more and more organizational or corporate clients. And so several people have told me or given me some advice to have more of like an entity name, And so I thought about that. And so I thought, okay, well, let me think about that. And I've actually been working on finding a name, an organization name for my business for at least a year. And so finally, I settled on People-Centered Leadership and launched it on August 1st, just this week.
People-Centered Leadership, why did you choose that name?
Because I think that what I've noticed in coaching my clients and working with organizations is they're trying to take a wellness approach, but it's also about getting productivity out of their employees. And so how do you balance that, right? Because on the one hand, you have wellness, which is maybe benefits and health oriented, but you also have productivity and leadership, which might be training and development. And it's like it was hard for organizations to wrap their head around, well, what's both? Like, how can we do both? And so what I found was that I was doing that. I was helping organizations with raising productivity, developing their leaders, and bringing wellness to them all in one, all together. And so this people-centered idea came to mind, and I've been hearing more and more about human-centered organizations and that approach. And so I settled on People-Centered Leadership. Plus the URL was available.
Oh, that's key right there.
I know exactly.
That is
right.
super key.
Yeah. It's People-Centered Leadership.
When you say wellness coach, that could be kind of broad, right? So what do you actually mean by wellness and wellness coach?
My approach to wellness is mental and physical wellness. I've always been interested in health and have been working on my own health for the last, I want to say more focused on my own health for the last maybe 15 years. And I discovered functional medicine. And so that resonated with me. And so I take a functional medicine approach to my own health. And I nerd out on this stuff a lot. So I went down rabbit holes, quite a bit, and discovered that this particular approach of functional medicine, which is a medical approach that looks for root cause of disease and disorder, right, instead of maybe just addressing symptoms. So that was really attractive to me. And that's how I wanted to approach my own health. So I've been interested in functional medicine as an approach to health, but also I know that there's a mental fitness, mental health component as well. You have to be, stress is a major antecedent or underlying root cause of chronic illness. And so if we're talking about stress, now we're talking about mental health, mental wellness. And so I went down the rabbit hole on that. And so really what I guess wellness to me means is both physical and mental wellness together, because they're two sides of the same coin.
Mhm.
You can't have physical health without mental health, and you can't have mental health without physical health. And so wellness is both of them together.
Mhm.
That's the approach I take. So when I started taking on more corporate clients, I found that that was something that they were looking for. Maybe they didn't explain it in the way that they're not asking for functional medicine, and that's not what I'm really truly delivering, but it's an approach.
Mhm.
It's an approach to employee wellness or leader development that is taking into consideration both their physical and their mental wellness together. And that I think is what's resonating, although it's my sense that this is a developing thing because organizations have had to really evolve how they're approaching employee engagement, leadership development, hiring, employee communication. I mean, everything is so different right now and undergoing so much change so quickly that I think even human resources managers are struggling, a little bit with trying to find, okay, well, how do I approach this? Well, what path do I take? And so there's a lot of, it's not confusion, it's more just undefined pathways on how to
So
do
they know they
this.
have a problem and they're not necessarily sure what to do about it, kind of.
Exactly. Things
Yeah.
are just very different out there. And employees are absolutely under a ton of stress.
Especially the HR. Because when I look at like
Mhm.
HR, they're like the first responders for the organization.
Mhm.
So they are the fire department, the police department, the medical staff. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what they are. And they
Mhm.
haven't had a break
Yes,
for the whole
that's right.
pandemic.
Yeah.
So for healthcare, first responders, teachers, and
Mhm.
HR in particular, none of them had a break.
You're right about that. Yeah.
So how are the HR people supporting themselves? They have to hold space for their, constituents or their
Yeah.
employees, but if they have a low capacity themselves, what are they doing that you've seen?
Yeah. What my observation is that their community, the HR community, is so supportive. They're so supportive of each other. They have SHRM, they have all their organizations and they interact with each other. And I think in a way, even though they may come from different companies and organizations, HR professionals locally and I think nationwide have a community. And I think they've been supporting each other through the last 3 years with all of this change. It's been very impressive.
What are you seeing in terms of support? What have you seen?
Well, just yesterday, I was at the Mink Center for Business and Leadership. They had an event where a panel on how can organizations better interact with Gen Z, their Gen Z employees, right? And so in the audience, I don't know exactly how many people were there, probably about 100 people there. And they were mostly HR professionals from local banks and, larger companies. But the vibe that I got in the room was very friendly. A lot of, they all knew each other. It was very a supportive vibe. And even coming from the panel that was being interviewed, there was a lot of empathy and compassion there, with regard to all the changes that employers are going through right now. And so that's my sense is the HR community generally they're very supportive of each other too.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So at that event that you went to yesterday,
Mhm.
what was the main takeaway you got from that?
That there are 5 generations in the workforce right now, everything from Gen Z to baby boomers, right? And that their perspective of work is very different from generation to generation. And so that impacts management styles, it impacts communication styles, it impacts understanding just in translation of different terminology or different things like, what is resilience? What is responsibility? What is accountability? What is trust? It means different things to different generations, and their expectations on themselves and others is also very different. And so this is something I think that is creating a little bit of that. Again, I don't like the word confusion, but it's a part of the environment that is
Is
in
disconnection.
companies right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that was a big takeaway. Also, that Gen Z, r- what's really important to them is having purpose, having a sense of purpose, not only in life, but that has to be in alignment with what they're doing in terms of work. And so, when you think about that, the baby boomer generation, it was all about, well, I can have my purpose, but I really need to adopt the purpose of the company, and I need to make my personal sacrifices, and I need to, put in 80 hours a week, right? Or
Mhm.
something like that. But Gen Z does not have that perspective. And they want integrated work-life balance. They want integrated sense of purpose. They really want a higher experience of work that is, it sounds like, more integrative with their life.
Did they talk about like the level of anxiety and depression in Gen Z though?
We didn't go into any in-depth conversation about that. I think it may have been mentioned, but yeah, it wasn't really a focus of the conversation.
I was reading a stat that said something like, it was something high, like 30% of Gen Z females in particular have heightened sense of anxiety, which is
Mm.
affecting their pay. And that was an
Mm.
article, I think it was in Fortune or one of
Yeah.
those that I had seen.
So exactly. So this is another reason why for me in rebranding to people-centered leadership, it felt right, because the mental wellness component in the workplace, I think, is becoming more and more important and essential, I should say. And that's what I'm hearing businesses are looking for.
How did this all start? Like, what is the turning point in your life that you went from corporate world
Mhm.
into this?
Yeah. I have been in sales pretty much all my professional life. I've worked in sales in the banking and financial industries, the medical industry, the technology industry. And my last corporate job was with Experian. At first, I was the Hawaii account executive. So I worked with all the banks and credit unions and utilities here selling data and analytical solutions. And then after that, I went back to the Bank of Hawaii for a short time before my husband and I became more involved caregivers to our aging parents. More specifically, my mother and my father-in-law, who are in their 90s. And so my husband had just retired from the fire department. He had 25 years in and was in fire rescue for the last 16 years of his career. So he ended up retiring, but still needed the flexibility even more so. So it became a little bit of a strain on my schedule and all of this stuff. So I was at a point, I think, even in my life, that I felt, well, we're pretty secure. I kind of feel like I don't want to feel like I can't do my job 100% because I'm being pulled in different directions. And so I made a difficult decision to leave that job, and we started caring for my father-in-law, who also had dementia. And so that went on for a few months, but I can't sit still. And I'm a learner,
So were you the
so
primary caregiver?
yes, pretty much.
So no
Yes.
outside help.
We did have some outside help. We did hire in caregivers who would come in during the day. And because my mother-in-law was also in her 90s, so she was there, but she couldn't actively be involved, right, in a lot of the caregiving. And so we would have a caregiver come in, but meal preparation, grocery shopping, all of that stuff, feeding my father-in-law, all of those things fell on the family.
Oh yeah.
And that was a lot of the role that my husband primarily, and I, in support of him and of course our own household, that was the role that I had. And so I just decided that, you know what, family is a priority. I made a difficult decision. And then while I was in that transition period, I thought, well, I can't just sit still. I'm a learner. I love to learn. So I need to be doing something else. And this was in 2019. So I thought, well, what online course can I take? Right. I was thinking about what new thing can I learn? And I thought, well, you know what? I've had an executive coach before. I wonder, that might be something interesting to add to my resume. So I found a coaching academy. Actually, it was a Canadian one called Coaching Out of the Box. I signed up for their 9-month course, which was a big investment for me. And by the first month, I knew, where has this been all my life? This is so me. I just loved what coaching is, which I didn't really know before. I was a coaching client before. I had an executive coach years ago when I had my own business, and it was so helpful. But I didn't really understand the profession of coaching. And so when I went through this course, it was like the clouds parted, the sun's rays hit
Like
my
you're
face
home.
and said, this is what you're meant to do. And so it was something I was familiar with in terms of having a home-based business, because as a sales consultant for larger mainland organizations, I worked from home, primarily, and I just ran my show. And so it was easy for me to adapt to that lifestyle again.
Can I just stay in this area for a little bit? And the reason is that I'm in the same kind of age group. My father, from 2014, had gotten diagnosed with cancer. From then, you know how it goes. It's like a emergency mad race to help them and so on. He passed away this year, just a few months ago. And the stress of being an actual caregiver, especially if you're the primary or secondary caregiver, is so high that, I mean, I always say I would rather dig a hole in concrete with a spoon in super hot sun. It is like so painful, to me at least. I don't want to dig up like pain, but for those people that are like in the same boat, right? Like, can you take us a little bit more into what is that like in terms for you? Like, what was your experience trying to manage everything at the same time, and then the breaking point of this is my duty, or whatever it is?
Yeah, I'd like to maybe take an approach to this question from an angle that might surprise you. So my response to that would be that you, the caregiver, particularly of a family loved one, need to take a step back and get in touch with what your internal sense of purpose and meaning in this scenario is. That sounds super philosophical, but it's really important, because what happens when you become a caregiver is you begin to lose sight of your boundaries, your personal boundaries. And that's caused in part by what you're thinking, the thoughts you're having. And a lot of them are contradictory to each other. So on the one hand, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to take care of my mom, or I got to take care of my dad, all of this stuff. On the other hand, it's like, why do I have to do this? Why is this falling on me? Right? And then there's all these important decisions that you have to make. So I don't think that it's very, very rare that someone will think about doing that, but that's really what you have to do. You have to look internally first and think a lot about 10 years from now, when I'm looking back on this situation, how do I want to see me showing up here? Because I think a lot of people lose sight of their priorities, and they lose sight of their boundaries when that situation becomes a part of their life. It's something they don't think about. And so they're just skimming on the surface of everything that's happening. And that's going to create stress. It's going to create a lot of internal stress, because you're out of alignment. You haven't had time to process how it's affecting you.
I fully agree with that. The thing I want to add is that if someone doesn't have strong boundaries already, or they have a boundary wound or so on, that they can't hold those boundaries, like they're not caring for themselves. Everything is about others, which tends to lead to shame, right? Which is like, I'm not worth it. I'm not worthy, so I'm going to keep doing this because I need to prove it, or so on. Then going into those types of situations, like now I have to caregive for my parent, I have to caregive for my kids, potentially a spouse, whoever else.
Yeah.
And then you throw the pandemic on it and you physically separate people out. I mean, that's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
The aftershocks of that. So to me, like when my dad got sick, everything stopped. We moved him to like Seattle for almost 2 years. we moved with him, like for about a year or so, going back and forth. And that's at the same time I had my fourth child. My wife was doing a full-time PhD, plus working, plus our businesses and so on. It was not just strain on the caregiver, but the caregiver's family, and it's invisible to an extent. So I surf with your husband, and there's another guy out there, and I would say, "What, you working?" He's like, "No, I'm just caring for my mom." And I would think, "Oh, you're lazy," initially. And then I had to do it. And then I'm like, "Oh, dude, that's the hardest job that there possibly is."
Yeah.
So what was the point where it's like, this is what my priority is going to be? Did you do that exercise of this is my boundaries and purpose and so on?
No, we didn't, only because given where we are in life, my husband and I, Greg and I, this is something we talked about way before it happened.
Mm.
We talked about what our priorities were going to be with our parents. And we knew that when it came to his parents and when it came to my mom, my dad's gone already, that we understood our roles, that we're the caregivers in our family. I have brother-in-laws, but they don't live in Hawaii. I have a sister, but it's kind of like understood that this is, I raised my hand to take care of my mom. So my husband and I actually already had an understanding that this was going to be our role individually and that we were going to support each other in it.
Can I ask something on that?
Mm-hmm.
You said that you knew that that was your role.
Yeah.
You raised your hand on it. What's underneath that?
For me personally, I have had experience in my own family of family being the caregiver. My grandma on my dad's side had Alzheimer's for 10 years, and we cared for her at home the entire time. It was a family effort. My uncles, my aunties, my mom and dad, they all took turns we had a whiteboard at her house with a schedule. We had help come in. It was a very coordinated family effort. We had a family meeting, the uncles and my aunties talked, and this is how they decided to do it. And that's how it happened. And it lasted for many, many years. I had maybe a couple of aunties who said, "This is beyond my boundary. I'm out." Okay, your boundary. That's good to communicate that, right? Rather than to harbor resentment. So on the one hand, I had that example.
And it didn't
And
scare you?
no, it didn't. And so when I think about my parents, I've always known that that's something that I wanted to do as much as I could. I never really thought about specific scenarios, but I think that maybe having seen the example with my grandma, I was somewhat aware of how it could be done, right? One way of how it could be done. And I knew that there are ways that I can look for help to come in or, whatever. I think that what that experience helped me also with is to anticipate, to do things before it's needed. So for example, the good example of that is right now we're doing a major renovation on our house. And in part, that's preparation to move my mom in. There's nothing wrong with my mom right now. She's 85. She's totally independent. She lives on her own. But I'm going to have her move in because I don't want to wait until some emergency or something happens and I'm having to drop everything I'm doing and then, taking care of my mom in more of an urgent kind of a situation, right? So it's a little bit of preparation that way. Even with my mother-in-law, who's still alive at 96 years old, we've set up things to make sure that we're in communication with her. Luckily, we only live a minute away from her. My husband's in daily contact with her. We go over there often. We're doing grocery shopping and bringing over meals. I guess it's integrated into our way of life. And for me, I've taken a little bit of time to think about anticipating a future time where I might have to devote more time or more planning or whatever into my mother-in-law or my mom's care. But, I can't predict the future. So I just have to know that whatever happens, I will have the mental resilience to handle whatever comes my way and that I will do my best to be resourceful. And I'm pretty confident that I have a good sense of where my personal boundaries are and that everything will work out well.
You guys are local, right? You were born local?
Yep.
So what is it that, this is what I see, like local people, they just know when the parents are getting old, they're coming to take care. It doesn't matter if you are executive at Google, you run a
Mhm.
hedge fund, it doesn't matter, because I get calls like that all the time as a recruiter.
Mhm.
And it's, I got to come home. What am I going to do? My parents, I have to care for my parent. Whereas I know for number of people I've talked to with my friends on the mainland, they're like, oh no, we just put our parent in the home or so on. It's like
Mhm.
over here, there's a super strong responsibility of somebody is going to take care of the parent,
Mhm.
regardless of almost anything else.
Mhm.
Do you notice that, or where's that coming from, or what?
Yeah, no, that's a really good observation. I don't know. I guess I've never really had the same kind of exposure to that you have. But my guess is that living local, we are among our generations. So we are among our great grandchildren and our great grandparents. So perhaps, I'm not sure, this is my guess, is that as local people, we have a much bigger view of generations. And so we have learned how they all interact, right? And how they benefit each other. The keiki really benefit from interaction with the kupuna, and the kupuna really benefit from the interaction of the adults, their adult children who care for them. And I think that we see that much more closely. And so we understand why that's important. That's my guess. That's what I'm thinking anyway. We interact so much more with multiple generations, and we witness multiple generations in our community interacting together. And we understand a lot better why that's so important.
You know what I noticed on that too is that when I went to school in the mainland and so on, if you're 18, for a good chunk of the people I met over there, you're kind of on your own, right? It's like
Hmm.
now it's time for you to move out, do on your own. That's not the case a lot of times over here, right? It's like housing is so expensive and so on. It's like, you can stay here. So because it almost seems like because we're not kicked out more or less so early, then it's almost unspoken that on the tail end of that, it's the same kind of response. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? You didn't kick me out early. I will be taking care of you at the end. That to me kind of, there's something there, at least when I notice it, maybe just in me.
And I think values are changing, now. I have a 26-year-old son, and I have 3 step children. They're from range in their early 30s to mid 20s. And, I think that on the one hand, they're very family oriented, but on the other hand, they're very independent. And I think that's good. I think that there's a nice balance to it. And the thing is, it's each person has to determine for themselves what they want their life experience to be. And this is what I think attracts me to coaching so much, is part of what my job is to help individuals gain clarity around their desire for their life experience. And that's going to include perhaps their sense of purpose. It's going to include perhaps their values. It's going to include their skills and talents and getting in touch with their authentic self. When you kind of, accumulate all of that stuff, you say, okay, well, are you living that? Are the decisions you're making and the path you're taking in alignment? And a lot of times it's not, because we're living what we think other people expect of us, right? And we're making decisions based on what the paths our friends are taking, or the path that we think our parents want us to take, or whatever that might be. And it feels on the one hand good because perhaps we're getting, pat on the back from society and family. But on the other hand, on the inside, it's feeling like, I don't know, I'm not happy. Why? And what we discover through the coaching conversation is the misalignment there. And so when a client gains clarity around that, again, it's like the clouds are parting and the sun begins to shine. And now they're able to identify where the gap is. And then as a coach, my job is to help them create the action steps to start moving forward in bridging that gap. And a lot of times they begin to realize that they put hurdles in front of themselves on their own.
Yeah.
It didn't have to be there. And so when they begin to see that and start moving those hurdles away and start clearing the mind of those negative thought patterns that they have, oh my goodness, now everything seems so much clearer. Your stress lowers and you raise your sense of happiness.
You ever heard of Carl Jung?
Yes.
Right? So Carl Jung
Famous.
has a super quote that I like, which is until you make the unconscious conscious, it will lead your life and you will call it fate.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I was listening to that, I mean, the same as when I'm coaching people or even helping them transition their career or whatever it may
Mm-hmm.
be, it's everything that runs us typically is unconscious.
Yes.
Yeah. So until that becomes conscious, the same way Peter Drucker said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
Yes.
Same thing. If you don't even know it's there, it's just going to keep running. Yeah.
Yes, that's so true. And a lot of times we believe that our thoughts reflect who we are. And that is not necessarily true either, because most people, in fact, I would say all people, do develop habitual negative thought patterns that actually sabotage our performance and our happiness. We don't know that. We think that it's a part of who we are. Let's take, for example, a perfectionist, right? And I tell you, Evan, you know what? I just want you to let you know right now that if I'm going to do this interview, I need it to be 76 degrees in the room. Okay, this is just how I am. This is just how I roll, right? And I'm believing that that is me and that is truly what I need to perform well. But what it truly is, a negative thought pattern in my head saying, if I don't control my environment, I'm not going to be able to do this well. It's a fear-based
It's
kind of
all
a
fear.
thought pattern.
But it kept you safe when you were young.
Exactly.
It's just that it's
Exactly.
not necessarily helping out now.
Exactly. Right. And there's neuroscience now, right? That is showing us that that thought pattern, the more we reinforce it over the decades of our life, become hardwired in our brain, right? These neural connections, but it becomes a hardwiring in our brain, like muscle memory. It becomes habitual. It becomes a pattern. It becomes so automatic that we truly believe that that is who we are and that is what we believe, with totally being unaware that it's actually inhibiting our ability to have healthier and happier relationships and be more productive.
They are adaptive measures that are helpful at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And as it progresses, they are not necessarily helpful. So that's unconscious, right? When
Mm-hmm.
your intention and your impacts don't match, then that's unconscious at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that in the body. So like in 2019, I had a series of injuries where, from 2018, basically my wife got really sick. We didn't know if she would live or not. She's okay now, but that time was very scary. I had second-degree burns. I got sick for 2 months, and then I broke my back, and I was immobile for kind of a while. I didn't want to wear the back brace because it was super uncomfortable that they wanted me to wear. And they would tell me no bending, lifting, or twisting. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. But it wasn't until the PT at Rehab Hospital said, look, if you don't wear this back brace, you see that kid over there? And it was a kid, well, kid to me is like 21 or somewhere around there, said, I'm looking at him, and this young man has ropes like tied around his legs, and he was grabbing it with his hand and moving his leg,
Wow.
right? He was paralyzed from the bottom down, I guess a motorcycle accident. She goes, you have the same injury that guy has, and your vertebrae is right on your spine. If you do not wear this brace and you make one wrong move, you're him.
Mm.
And I'm like, give me the brace. And I was like, everything from there was do not move. Like, do not bend, do not lift, do not twist, do not move for like 8 months, right? And that was in there, totally in there. But you take it 2 years later, that was still stuck in there. So my flexibility was really weak because every time I would move I would automatically stop. It's not a conscious stop. My body just knew to stop. So that had to be a conscious effort to actually go into the body and retrain out of it and so on. But that's the exact same way with all of these other pieces that are there. At one point, being negative and saying, don't do this and so on was helpful. At this point in our life, it could potentially be not helpful. But until it's conscious, it runs you.
Exactly. And so I offer a program called Positive Intelligence. Have you heard of it?
My friend is in it. So that's the only thing I've heard.
Yeah,
I don't want to out them, but they're in it, yeah.
So Positive Intelligence. There's a book by the same name, and the author is Shirzad Shamin. He is a Stanford researcher and lecturer. He has a TED Talk out there. He wrote that book, and it's not really new. I think he put it out like in 2016 or so. So it's been out there for a while. But what he did about 4 years ago was to transform this into an actual program. It's a 6-week program. And he was ingenious. What he did was, after having implemented this program in a lot of Fortune 500 companies, all the big names that he's kind of, rolled this out to their leadership, Google and Jamba Juice and Wells Fargo and all of these company names. He did something really ingenious. He invested in app technology, and then he started rolling this out into the coach community and started offering that program for free to coaches as a way to introduce them to the idea of exactly what we've been talking about, how to identify your habitual negative thought patterns that hold you back, and then work on changing that, right? Shifting into a different way. And so anyway, about 4 years ago or so, he created a whole program around it and is using the coach community as a way to bring this out into the general public and especially into small and medium-sized businesses. And it truly is a transformational program. If the individual going through it is open-minded and does the mental fitness exercises, I have had clients who have changed their lives. And it's really exactly what we've been talking about: identifying your negative thought patterns and understanding how it's holding you back, working on building a daily practice of mental fitness through an app-guided daily activities over an app. You start to do these mental fitness exercises every day that's designed to rewire your brain. So what I mean by that is, I talked about hardwired neural connections, right? Because we've had these negative ideas and thoughts in our head since we were a kid, and we've brought it into our adult life. So it begins to atrophy that, because when we notice that we're having that negative thought, we're intercepting it. So the first mental muscle is saboteur intercept. We call these negative thought patterns saboteurs. And so we intercept it. And then what we do is we shift it through mental fitness. We shift that thought so that now we are purposefully changing the neural connections in our brain. So now when we have a negative thought and we're firing off that neural pattern going to those negative thoughts, we're purposefully stopping it, and we're activating neural activity to other parts of our brain that's connecting us to our empathy circuitry, to our big picture thinking, to our intuitive wisdom, to our creativity. And when we do that, now we're strengthening our mental resilience. Now we're strengthening our mental muscles. Now we're beginning to shift away from pessimistic, negative thought patterns that hurt us, and we're developing stronger mental resilience, building positivity in our outlook, tapping into other parts of our brain that have other kinds of intelligence, right? This is the subconscious that I think you are referring to. It's there, it's working, kind of like a parallel processor, right? We're here working on our RAM stuff, but then the computer's working on other problem
I'm
solving.
talking about the operating system,
Yeah, exactly.
your unconscious mind.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what we're impacting, so that we're bringing to our everyday lives a lot more connection to people and a different kind of problem solving that is helping us not waste our mental energy and emotion and stress on negativity, but bringing positivity and creative problem solving. And it's really impactful.
Like, what's a
Impactful.
story of impact, like an anecdotal story?
When I was going through the program for the first time,
This was after the other coaching program.
yes. So I was going through the positive intelligence program. And at that time, life was good. I have a great marriage with my husband. But one of the things that would happen every now and then is we would get into it every now and then, right? When we had to maybe talk about making some decision, I would say, oh yeah, here's all the information and this is the right choice because A, B, C, D. And so let's do this. And Greg, my husband, would go, well, why does it always have to be your way? And I said, well, it doesn't, right? So tell me, okay, tell me, what is your way? Okay, well, see, my way is better. because of these reasons, right? And so every now and then we would just kind of like struggle in,
Did it
and
turn into a full-on beef or not
no,
really?
no, 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 no,
Oh.
no plates were thrown, no plates were broken in the
Mhm.
process. But it would be kind of heated, and it would just kind of not be, it would go to bed mad, and it would carry over to the next day, and it was just not good. So anyway, I'm going through this program, and I'm beginning to learn things about myself. And there's an assessment that you take called the Saboteur assessment, and it identifies your most common negative thought patterns. And mine happen to be my saboteurs are the hyper rational and the restless. There are 9 different kinds of saboteurs. My top happen to be hyper rational and
What
restless,
does that
which,
mean, saboteur, then?
yeah. So saboteurs are the negative thought patterns that you have. So the reason why it's called a saboteur is because they sabotage your performance and your relationships, right?
Is there anything
And
positive about the saboteur, though? What is it helping? Can you get
well,
results doing it that way or save yourself from pain?
that's what they want you to think. That's what the saboteurs have caused us to believe, which is why we let them have power over us, right? If I don't have my saboteurs to push me into doing things, right, and achieving things, I wouldn't be where I'm at. But at the same time, I'm not happy. At the same time, I feel shame or guilt, or at the same time, I'm feeling inadequate. At the same time, I'm beating myself up, right? So yes and or no, the saboteurs are there and you think that they're helping you, but in reality, they're not. A lot of my clients are telling me, wow, my saboteurs don't allow me to live in the moment. My saboteurs don't allow me to appreciate what's happening now and the achievements that I do have. I'm already off to the next thing. So in this story with my husband, my saboteurs my strongest being the hyper rational means that I intellectualize things a lot. I'm pushing my emotions down because it's too messy, right? It's too uncomfortable for me. So I'll just stick with the facts. I'll look at the information. It becomes a calculus for me, and that's how I solve problems. For my husband, Greg, his top saboteur is the hypervigilant. The hypervigilant saboteur makes you believe that you're the only one that can see all the dangers out there.
Hence firefighter.
Yeah,
Hence
exactly.
extreme firefighter.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you have to protect other people because you see it, they don't, and so you have to make sure that you have plan B and plan C and plan D and plan E and plan F and plan G, right? Because you see all the risks. So that's my husband's strong saboteur. So when it came to decision making, I'm trying to be efficient, but he's trying to really, look at all the potentialities. And I'm thinking, but the greatest probability is this. We can forget about the extremes, right? But he is thinking about the extremes. This was all unseen to both of us before. But after going through the program, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, that is exactly what's happening. And so what I had to work on is to quiet that hyper-rational saboteur, get more connected to my emotional circuitry, right? My empathy, what shifted for me was, Robin, yes, you guys are trying to solve the problem, but you got to be appreciative of Greg's input here because he's seeing things from a different perspective and it might be valuable. So don't just discount him. Don't let your hyper-rational saboteur tell you that he's wrong. You got to give him the space because another thing that's important to me is our marriage, is the relationship. And so I have to
Which
allow.
is more important to you?
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? In the moment, I'm not thinking about that because I'm muscle memory to that way of thinking, right? That hyper rational way of thinking. But now by building my mental muscles, now I'm able to have that space. Now I'm able to connect with my empathy circuitry. Now I'm able to appreciate what my husband's input is. And Evan, I'm telling you, it changed it, not only for me, but also for him. So, he can see what his saboteur is.
Did you notice any change in him? So what happens is a lot of times with any type of dyadic relationship, right, two people or so on, it's always the other person needs to be fixed, right? You go
Yeah.
into a couples therapy or so on, it's always like, we're here, this person has a problem, please get them straight so they understand exactly what's going on, right? When what really needs to happen is there's a U-turn, right? Y-O-U, U-turn back in, and it's our stuff that we need to get resolved. And
Yeah.
then when we do that, then all of a sudden this problem goes away, and it's not the other person.
Yeah.
It's me. Yeah.
Well, that happened also, right? So on the one hand, yes. So when I changed, the dynamic changed. When I became more mentally resilient, it benefited the relationship. But then when he went through the program, then it had an even greater positive outcome as well, right? I can't experience things from his perspective, but he's making changes and that's influencing the relationship. And so I can't even tell you, Evan, the last time we had one of those, headbutt moments. I can't even tell you when. It's been, I don't know, it's been months, if not a year already.
Do you think it's also because he's retired now?
He's been retired for 5 years.
Oh, for 5
Yeah,
years.
no.
Okay.
But I'll tell you that was my personal story, but I've rolled this out in organizations. You'll see a little bit about it on my website because I use it as a little bit of a case study. But what happens is when you do this in a team, when you roll this out in an organization, earlier I talked about performance, leadership, and wellness together, right? So what happens is it impacts the individual at that personal level. It's improving things at home in their personal life. But in an organization, in a team, what's happening is it's building trust. It's enhancing mutual accountability. It's allowing for better communication, especially around difficult conversations. And it's helping the team members have a better understanding of each other, knowing that, hey, we're all looking for our own self-actualization. I am, and I know you are. And so I know that this experience that we're having in this company with this job, in my role as our team, is playing a role in each of our greater sense of purpose in our life. And so it's like a 360-degree impact that this program makes. So the team operates better. But here's the kicker, something I completely didn't expect. When I asked my client for the feedback on what the impact was, they said that it positively impacted people who weren't in the program. Just by the team becoming more efficient and calmer and different, it had a halo effect on other people in the organization who were interacting with the team in a positive way.
I mean, that makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
projection is perception, right? So whatever you see inside, what you feel, if you feel the world's dangerous and so on, that's all we see. And we project it onto somebody else, and that's how we can see it. It's like inside first and then outside.
Exactly. And
That's the only way it works.
Right,
You cannot
right.
fix all the outside.
right.
And you do, when I listen to that, it goes wellness as the foundation, which then creates a more whole leader. Then you create performance.
Exactly.
It's in that
exactly.
order.
And I think, kind of going back to what we talked about earlier with wellness and HR, right? And the rapid change and the struggle of adapting to that change with regard to HR departments and what they're trying to do for their employees. This is, I think, why it's resonating with more and more organizations. And so I'm continuing to roll out positive intelligence in companies is because it is about mental and physical wellness together. Stress is a physical response. Stress is physiological. But where does stress start? It starts in the thoughts. It starts in the mind. And so you really have to approach it together from both sides.
When I think about that, it goes, stress is the effect of the force being too high for whatever it can handle, right? So like you have loose lug nuts on your car tires and you're going around a tight turn, it creates stress on that joint much more than if it was tightened, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the stress is a effect, not the cause of something else. And then when you think about it, you go, okay, is the cause then going to be coming out of my mental? The stories we tell ourselves and so on. Could it be something physiological, right? I think when people look at stress a lot as like its cause of stress, stress is still a symptom of something else.
Stress can be good, right? The human person does need some degree of stress. We actually do need a little bit of that kind of stress stimulation it is healthy for the body to have a little bit of stress, but it's when the stress becomes chronic that it
Yeah.
becomes a problem. And it won't be evident immediately, right? We're talking about over years with chronic stress and high levels of cortisol that are just sustained for a long time. That's when you start to manifest a lot of the metabolic disease, cardiovascular disease, however it's going to manifest, right? Chronic inflammation, all kinds of things. And this is now getting back full circle to where we started with the functional
Hmm.
medicine. And so in addition to becoming certified as a coach, I am a board certified health and wellness coach as well. And it's so interesting because in my coach training, this is what we talk about. We talk about how the mental affects the physical. And so what we're really trying to do is you want to make work challenging. Even as an individual, you want to engage with something challenging that's going to help you grow. And that is optimal, right? That is when you can get into the flow. That's when you're kind of in this place where you're being challenged, but you're meeting the challenge. And there's this continual positive feedback loop because you're achieving, but you're kind of stressed because you have to work hard, but then you're achieving. And that's a good kind of stress. It becomes negative when you can't turn it off. And when those negative saboteurs start making you believe that you're not achieving enough or you're doing something wrong or whatever the negative thought pattern is. If it's negative, if it's creating a negative emotion, you're being sabotaged, you're being hijacked. And so that's a little bit of the difference. The antithesis to that, or the good stress, is I'm working towards something. I'm feeling positive. I'm feeling like I'm achieving my purpose. I feel like I'm contributing. I feel like I'm in alignment with my sense of purpose. I'm enjoying being engaged with people, right? Those can feel like stress, but it's in the positive side. So that's the difference. That's the difference. It's normal to constantly bounce between them. It's a matter of what is the ratio. So there's a ratio of 3 to 1, which is it takes 3 positive thoughts or emotions to balance out every one. And so most people are not in that ratio. Most people might be on a 1 to 1 or less than a 1 to 1. But if you are experiencing primarily negative thoughts and emotions in your day, if more than a third of your thoughts and emotions are negative in the day, you may be in a state of chronic stress.
3 to 1 sounds pretty close in ratio to me, because I know that you ever heard of John Gottman?
Yes.
So
Is
Gottman
he?
is a pretty famous researcher for like
Yes.
couples therapy and
Mm-hmm.
so on. And I think one of the stats, I think it's from Gottman, I could be wrong, but it was in couples dialogues that the positive to negative ratio had to be something. It was like 9 or 20 to 1 or something. It was like
Yeah.
way more that
True.
had to be in order to kind of balance itself out.
Yeah. That's in marriages. Yes. So that was done on research that could essentially predict, right, the divorce rate
Yeah,
in couples.
right.
Yeah. So the 3 to 1 ratio is coming from Dr. Barbara Fredrickson out of North Carolina Chapel Hill University. And she is a positive psychology researcher. And so the general ratio is 3 to 1. So it's something that maybe could be applied in the workplace and generally in your life. But when you're talking about marriage, right, that important relationship, you are correct that the research is showing a much, much higher ratio of 7 or more to 1.
You know
Yeah.
the thing though, when you think about it though, we have marriage is a relationship between you and somebody else externally, whereas the relationship that I believe we're discussing is internally, and that marriage is you can't break up. That to me is the more important relationship, because
hmm
when that relationship is strong and connected and valued and empathized, then the outside relationships just kind of follow suit.
The way that we look at that through positive intelligence is a shift in perspective. It really is a shift in perspective. It's like another way that I like to think about positive intelligence, the program, is accelerating wisdom. It's like when you look back from where you are today, you look back when you in your 20s, right? And you go, man, I wish I knew then what I know now, right? a lot of, if you think about that, you think, I used to believe things that were not true, or I used to believe things that were inaccurate because we were in a mindset back then that we just simply were unaware. We didn't have life experience, or we just misunderstood the environment or whatever it is, right? So we can look back now and go, wow, I just didn't know. I was whatever. In the same way, so now you have a perspective that you didn't have before. You're the same person, but you shifted perspective because of greater maturity, greater knowledge, right?
You're kind of not the same person, though. Because with all of the life experience and so on, you will be different. You may be in the same body to an extent, but
Mhm.
kind of not.
Well, I would challenge that a little bit and say that you still have the same essence that you
Your
have.
soul.
Yes, soul, spirit, but how you express yourself is essentially relatively stable all your life. So for example, I use an assessment in my practice called the VIA character strengths, the VIA character strengths. And you can actually, there's a free assessment you can take. You can go to viacharacter.org and take this assessment. And what it assesses is your innate strengths. So I'm not talking about skills and talents like Strengths Finder and DISC, right? Myers-Briggs stuff. This is about your innate natural expression. And that does stay relatively stable over time. So the VIA character strengths is the underlying research comes from the study of positive psychology, Dr. Martin Seligman, and all of the founding fathers of positive psychology about going on maybe 15 years ago or so. And a lot of these other assessments like StrengthsFinder, you'll see some parallels, but character strengths is really not about your strengths and talents. It's about your expression, how you naturally express yourself. I would say yes and no to that, Evan. The way that I look at it is kind of like we're climbing a mountain, right? So we're still the same hiker. We're going up the mountain, but at different points in our journey, we have a different perspective. We're looking back and seeing things that we didn't see before, but we're still looking up and we still can't see what's in the future. But the experience that we've had along the way has impacted us. Now we're acclimated to a new altitude. Now our legs are stronger and we can carry ourselves a lot higher. Now we know better what provisions we need as we go higher up the mountain. So we're more educated, we're more mature. In that way, we are different. I guess what character strengths helps to bring to the surface is you do have a core authentic self.
I think that's what I was saying. Yeah,
Okay.
at your core, your soul, your spirit, your authentic actual self, without all of the stuff that comes on from society and so on, that stays the same.
Yeah,
absolutely. Come in with it at birth, you leave with it.
Yeah,
and when you die.
Yeah,
we're on the same page.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about changing in perspective, and that's a little bit of the work that I believe that my clients are able to achieve through the positive intelligence program is an accelerating of wisdom. Instead of waiting till you're 70 and looking back and saying, oh, why did I let my health go and sacrifice that for work, right? You can actually unveil that wisdom now when you work on your mental fitness, when you examine those negative thought patterns that hold you back, that sabotage and hijack you, when you become aware of that, and then you do the actual work of mental fitness, which is atrophying the neural activity that continues to reinforce the negative thoughts and start to build mental muscles into other parts of your brain that's helping to advance the wisdom.
Have you ever heard of neurofeedback?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever done it? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
My sister actually is a clinical psychologist, Leanne Philhauer. Her practice is called Present Mind Institute. It's an integrative psychology practice, and I'm associated with their clinic. And she's got, I think she's got like 4 clinical psychologists in her practice. It's located in Kaneohe.
Oh, wow. So good size. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they use neurofeedback.
Yeah, because my wife is a neurofeedback practitioner as well as an educator and so on too. And I've done, hundreds of them myself. I was just mentioning it because that's the easiest way. When you're talking about like rewiring and so on, that's the least like feel it to heal it way to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You have to do it every day. And this is the thing I think that most people aren't aware that they have more control over than they think. Because when we get up in the morning and we put our feet on the floor, we're already in the future. We are so not present. We are either ruminating on our regrets from yesterday, or we're already thinking about what we're going to have for lunch and what I have to do. And we're
Neurofeedback
never
is
in
super
the
good for that.
present. Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Super
yeah,
good for that,
yeah.
for ruminating thoughts and mind
Yep.
chatter. Just wondering if you had done that in conjunction with your program, you know what I mean? Because it would make the neuroplasticity easier,
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah. It's done through guided exercises over the app. And the app is kind of gamified in a way where there are different meters that measure your mental charge in the moment and then how much mental muscle you're building over the weeks that you're in the program. We're not hooking you up to any neurofeedback device
But
or
maybe in
doing.
conjunction is what I was saying. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like you do it in conjunction because
Yeah.
neurofeedback is super good with like ADHD,
Yeah.
anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
depression, even seizures, and then really good with developmental trauma and helping to kind of lower fear
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. I was thinking, oh, if you do it at the same time, then it would make it like easier. It's almost like, having a spotter all the time when you're lifting weights,
Yeah.
but helping you lift it. So you never tried it like in conjunction, like with your sisters
Um,
and that.
no, I think that for my clients are tend to be professionals and, working in kids and super busy lives. Program is very, it's curated and developed in a way that is designed for really busy people.
Mm.
I could possibly integrate it. I can see doing that, but it would then require like another level of participation on the client side
The
that
client's
they'd have
motivated and the
to,
client's
yeah,
motivated.
that they'd have to, be willing to sign up for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you figure if the client's motivated enough to go into that program, which takes a commitment and, of time and money and so on,
Hmm.
they could be definitely motivated to do it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Because very busy people that are at high levels, we want to get stuff done.
Yep, exactly. But, it's like a muscle, right? Are you going to be able to lift, 200 pounds after the first workout? No. You're going to have to start. It's going to be difficult to get into a rhythm. It's always a challenge to start a new habit, and especially a new daily habit, right? But the metaphor that I like to use when I talk to people about the program is it's kind of like brushing your teeth. When you were little, your parents had to like get on you to brush your teeth. Evan, did you brush your teeth this morning? Right. And they had to drill it into you to begin to help you formulate the habit of brushing your teeth. But you don't brush your teeth to fix a cavity that you have right now, right? You brush your teeth today because it's about oral hygiene overall and health in the future. You brush your teeth today for Evan a year from now, right? It's kind of the same thing. Initially, that's why we have an app. That's why we have weekly check ins in the program. It's to help with the accountability and help people stay on track. But once you kind of get into the rhythm of it, once you begin to feel the effects of it, now there's intrinsic motivation to keep going. And hopefully, by the end of the 6 to 8 weeks that the program runs, you'll be doing daily mental fitness. And that's going to have an impact, both maybe in the short term, but mostly for the longer term.
So how are you tying in functional medicine into this?
The way that I tie it in is, like I said, we're both mind and body. So in conjunction with helping people to rewire, right, that neuroplasticity, helping them to atrophy their negative thoughts and start gaining more connectivity to other parts of their brain that are bringing value to their life. It's also about making sure that you are doing other things for your physical health that also influence your brain, your cognition, your emotional state, your mood state. So, for example, gut microbiome. We are learning so much more about that. But I'll tell you that the gut microbiome came onto my personal radar over 10 years ago because I started experiencing autoimmune symptoms. And I would go to the doctor and all my tests would come back normal.
Like what kind of symptoms? What would show
A
up?
number of different weird things. It was like joint pain, just brain fog. By 2 o'clock, I'd be so tired that I would have to take a nap every day.
How long ago was that?
12 years
Oh,
ago
10, 12.
now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Just feeling kind of just no energy, lack of energy, even though I'm a super active person. And then I started getting a rash, like this weird, very, very itchy rash in like my joint site. So here in my elbow and the back of my neck.
It's like
And
rheumatoid arthritis kind, where
I
the
don't
joint's
know.
going and then all.
I don't know. So I went to the doctor, right? All my tests are coming back normal. I go to the dermatologist. So I go to the doctor for my joint pain, right? No, test normal. I go to the dermatologist for the rash. She gives me a
Mm-hmm.
cortisone cream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going, okay, thank you. It's helping the itchy, but I want to know why. I want to know what's causing all this stuff. I have a feeling they're connected, but nobody's helping me with that. So I had to do all my own research. And what I discovered was that I possibly could have leaky gut because some of the symptoms sounded the same, including the rash. And so I thought, well, how do I fix that? Right? A gastroenterologist is not going to do a biopsy of my gut to find out if I have damaged gut lining, right? So I just did my own research and I discovered that gluten in wheat for some people can create this condition,
So
celiac disease.
That's what I
Right.
meant. Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So I thought, well, I can take out gluten on my own. I don't need a doctor for that. So I stopped eating bread, wheat, anything that has wheat in it. And Evan, I'm telling you, in 3 months, all my symptoms were gone. All my symptoms were gone.
So gluten is all the
Gluten.
gluten.
I have a non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And I went down the rabbit hole deep on this one. And so I learned about the gut microbiome, the trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that live in our gut that actually we need to live. I test my gut microbiome about once a year.
You mean you do the poop test?
I do the poop
That one, and
test.
you send it away.
Yes,
Okay, and
send it away.
then you're taking probiotics, or what are you doing?
I do that, but I try to get most of my gut microbiome nutrients from food.
Okay,
So that's the best way. The
like what
best
foods are you doing? Or
fruits
what,
and vegetables, fermented foods,
like a pickle or like a kimchi?
natto,
Natto.
kimchi. Yes, all of those yummy
Like
things.
which ones you like the
Oh,
best?
I don't know. I mean, natto is a newer one for me. And this is so interesting. I used to think I hate natto,
Mm.
but I love natto now. Isn't that weird?
Which one though? Because there's so many.
So with natto, I think the natto itself is the same. It's the sauce
So,
packets, the flavorings that you put in there that's different. So I don't even use that. I just throw those little packets, I just throw it away because shoyu has wheat in it. If I don't know what's in it, I'm going to throw it away because I don't trust. And wheat is used as a filler in so many things. You got to read labels. Tube wasabi has wheat in it. You got to read the label. Oyster sauce, shoyu, gochujang, all of those. You got to read the label because it has wheat in it. So I usually buy tamari. Tamari is a fermentation process of soy that does not use wheat. So it's a little stronger, but it tastes you wouldn't know the difference. It's a little bit more expensive, but I really make it go a long way. So I cook at home. My husband and I, we grow vegetables. We are very careful about where we get our produce from and our meat.
So where do you get it from?
We like to shop at Kualoa Ranch. We try to support local as best we can. We shop at some farmers markets, have some good quality meats there. Our meat intake is actually small. We don't not eat meat, but in proportion to the other things that we do eat, it's really a third
Have you
of.
seen Maui Nui venison?
No,
Yeah.
but
So they're, I mean, Maui,
yeah,
right? So they have this access deer problem, right? So they're like feral ungulates. They are, they decimate places.
yeah,
But there's thousands. I think there's like 60,000 of them
yeah.
or so. So what the company does is they will hunt the deer
Mhm.
and they will humanely like kill them. So there's
Mhm.
no stress on this animal whatsoever. I think the USDA are in the trucks like with them. So they will process that thing in something like 45 minutes or whatever.
Wow.
So it's basically organic. It's like the healthiest, no steroids ever lived in the nature,
Yeah.
no stress, dying. And then what they'll do is they'll ship it to you.
Oh.
Yeah, so they even have Kamaina
Oh.
packs and like
Okay.
and Kamaina kind of discounts on
Yeah.
certain things. They're reducing that population to kind of a safe level, and then they are creating a sustainable business. But the
Yeah.
meat itself, it tastes almost to me like filet mignon because it's so tender.
Yeah.
Or almost like a duck to an extent, but there's like no fat in it really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we love local venison.
Yeah.
We had a friend, and we have an outside freezer too, because we feed our dogs raw food too.
Mm.
We're super aware of what we eat, and our dogs too. But anyway, we had like all this, I think it was Big Island venison, I think. I don't know. My husband got it. But we had like packs and packs and packs of it, and we just used the last one literally, I think a month ago. And so, yes, we're looking for a new source
Check it
for
out, the
good.
Maui Nui
Okay.
venison. Yeah.
Okay.
It has no sugar in it. I eat that as my snack. It
Yeah.
doesn't spike my blood sugar. Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
get tired after I eat it.
Good. Yeah. That's how I feed my microbiome primarily is through food, but I do take supplements as well. Not so much probiotics because it's really hard to find good real probiotic. Pretty much is a few essential nutrients and vitamins that our body needs, your microbiome makes. And it can only make it if you have intake of certain kinds of foods. So the best source to feed your microbiome is going to be whole foods, fruits, vegetables, washed, of course. I mean, garden grown and organic, no pesticides is the best, right? But if you buy it from the store, make sure that you thoroughly wash your fruits and vegetables. That's the best way to get it colorful. So the phytonutrients in colorful fruits and vegetables is the best, particularly black and purple. So I'm talking blackberries, blueberries, eggplant, right? Those kinds of foods are super good. Mushrooms. Mushrooms are awesome. And just all kinds of greens. Just eat the rainbow is
So
what they say.
do you take prebiotics?
Prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics in different forms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our supplements for the last 4 years, I think we've been obtaining from a company called AMARE, AMARE. And it's so interesting because they were one of the first companies that I became aware of that connected gut health to mental health. And it's pretty much, I think, known now that the fiber you eat helps you grow a healthy microbiome, and it's in your gut that 70% of your health of your feel-good neurotransmitters are produced, right? And it's the health of the gut that also determines the signaling between the gut and the brain. Because that's another area that even if you have a healthy gut, if that connection between your gut and your brain has static, you may not be getting the full benefit of dopamine, serotonin, right? All of those other kinds of neurotransmitters. So
Well,
yeah.
a lot of the serotonin receptors are in your gut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As well as 90% of your immune system. So this is the kind of where the functional medicine aspect comes in, is when you are able to become aware of root cause, right? We're a system. So not only are we human cells, but we're trillions of bacterial cells that are commensal that we need to survive. If you have bacteria in your gut, you won't survive. If you have a dysbiosis or an imbalance of good and bad bacteria, if there are too many bad bacteria in your gut, that can be life-threatening. H. pylori, all of these different, fungus, right? And yeast can be very bad for you. My microbiomes right now are communicating with your microbes. We have microbes in our airway, in our oral microbiome. So Dr. Mark Hyman, who is kind of the founding father of functional medicine, Cleveland Clinic, all of that stuff. He has excellent podcasts and books and, information out there that people can research.
What's your thoughts on hormone replacement? Because
I
functional
am,
medicine doctors are
yeah,
typically dealing with hormone replacement therapies, testosterone, estrogen,
yeah.
bioidentical.
I guess for me personally, I haven't really had a health concern in that area that stimulated me to dive deeper in it. I have a really good friend, Dr. Margaret Christensen. She has a women's health clinic in Dallas, Texas called Carpathia Collective. And all of my, at least for females, hormone questions I ask her, and I don't have concerns in that area for myself personally. So I don't really know. I would say, I guess generally, that I would probably want to take a natural approach first for balancing hormones, even sleep, getting adequate sleep, getting adequate exposure to, infrared light by being outside to balance out your natural production of melatonin, all of that stuff, I think comes in handy. But yeah, I'm not as familiar with hormones.
Mm.
Yeah.
Are you tracking your glucose?
No.
So I have a tracker
Mm-hmm.
because 90 something percent of people that are pre-diabetic, they don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all my blood tests were showing pretty good. But then when I got this, it's like, well, I'm right in that range, right?
Oh.
So
Mm-hmm.
which the symptoms for that would be fatigue, brain fog, you feel like you're getting older, libido, the whole
Mm-hmm.
deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And by monitoring that, it makes a big difference. But I'll tell you the one thing, because I've been monitoring this for maybe a month only, the one big factor for me is electrolytes. I didn't even
Mm.
think about it. I took it because I don't know why I did. Somebody was like, I had these liquid ones that we would take, and I had to get new ones because we ran out. And my son had like a stomach thing, so he's like, we've got to get more. And then this other one popped up, so I bought it. It's LMNT. But it was like really expensive. It was like $1.50 a packet.
Wow.
And I was like, dude, this thing is expensive, but whatever, I'll buy it. So I bought it. And then as I was tracking it on this, I noticed, holy cow, my blood sugar is going down and
Mm.
it's staying consistent and not spiking the same as it would with the same type of meals.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that one to me is like, wow, this is something really interesting. You can actually make it yourself if you go to the website
Uh-huh.
and you just buy it in bulk because it's only 3 ingredients. It's salt, potassium chloride,
Mm-hmm.
and magnesium malate in like specific amounts.
Mm-hmm.
You just measure it yourself. But that one has been kind of game changer
Yeah.
by keeping the blood sugar kind of stable and not at a heightened level. Just everything, energy level, mood, the whole deal.
Yeah.
How many times you got to go bathroom, all of that stuff,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just kind of evens out where it's like, oh, is this my mental status or so on? It's
Yeah.
actually, that one was physical.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, this stuff is really, really nerd out when it comes to health stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much, right? I mean, another thing that I've been doing for organizations, I think it was May, right? May is Mental Health Month. I was so busy doing lunch and learns and presentations on health things, and I was bringing a functional medicine angle to my health talks.
Mhm.
So I talked about heart resonance, right?
You
And
talking about
how
HRV or?
yeah,
Okay.
heart rate variability,
Hmm.
but it's about how probably by now, because we've been talking for a while, our heart rate variability is probably synced up, right? And that speaks to in an organizational context, it talks about the workplace, and with remote work being prevalent now, there's still an important place for in-person interactions to happen with employees, and so that dynamic of understanding, if you're stressed, your heart rate variability is becoming incoherent. That's what we call kind of irregular and kind of spiky, right? Not
Hmm.
calm. And you're walking into a meeting, you are impacting the other people in the room with your energy, your heart rate variability being incoherent. So one of the things that I coach clients around is when they are about to go into an important meeting and they're feeling a bit nervous about it, or they're giving a presentation. I even had this one client who had to fire an employee, and coaching them and guiding them to do some of these mental fitness exercises right before they have to have a difficult conversation. And not only does it help with just bringing stress level down and heart rate variability into some coherence, but it's also helping them to get into the right mindset, connecting with that empathy circuitry. And so when they're having these difficult conversations, it's going a lot better for them. Or,
Yeah.
if they're going into a meeting, they're feeling much more grounded and present. The experience of these workplace situations are a lot more positive and productive.
Have you ever heard of internal family systems or IFS?
I had not until I read it on, I think, on your
Oh,
website. I still don't know much about it though. What is that?
so IFS is a psychotherapy model.
Mm-hmm.
It's super fast growing. Like for a therapist to get into a level 1 training, which is from the institute that basically hosts IFS, there's like thousands of people trying for like 32 spots. So
Mm.
the concept is that there's a multiplicity of mind. So what would happen is we all have parts, right? So in yours, it's like you have a saboteur, right? They're different parts. Like one does it this way, one does it that way. Some part might tell you like, hey, you should work harder. And then another one's like, no, 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 you should not work, right? So we all have these different parts of us and they all have roles. So the two primary roles are one is a protector. So protect the system. One will manage things and then another one will jump in reactively when emotions get out of control. And the other part's role will be a part that holds a wound. So it
Mm.
actually gets injured and it holds that wound. And every time it wants to come back up because it wants to heal that, then that same pain comes with it. And once that pain comes in, so let's say the pain is shame. I'm bad. Something's wrong with me. It comes up. It did not get what it needed to be able to resolve that at the time. It starts to come up.
Mhm.
Now, managing parts need to manage that. So the ones that are like, I'm going to be a good student, or I'm going to be really smart, or I'm going to be pretty all the time, or funny, or things like that. And when it doesn't work, then the reactive firefighter ones come in. And that could be any addiction. That could be rage, anger, drinking, could be extreme self-talk, could be gambling, all the way up until suicide, right? And suicide actually has a good intention, but the impact is definitely not necessarily good, right? And then when you have those parts, we have ourself. So that's what we had talked about earlier, right?
Mhm.
You come in with it at birth, you leave with it at death. It's your soul, your spirit. It's just kind of all knowing. But when there are things happening, like there's traumatic things going on or so on, parts all take over, and then self is kind of evacuated for the most part. So it's like the self would be like the sky and the parts would be like the clouds. But if you're in the Pacific Northwest, 9 months, the clouds are in front of the sky. Sky's not hurt, but the longer it goes, you just feel there's no more sky. And
Mhm.
people's like, well, I got to go find myself. It's actually there. It's just kind of covered up.
Mm.
So in IFS, it's basically building the relationship between self and parts. And then the relationship, once it's strong enough with the protective parts, that allow self to go to the parts that hold the wounds, heal the wounds, because they're not their wound, right? They just hold that
Mhm.
wound. And then those other parts that we're protecting they don't have to protect that way anymore. So instead of me going to, so let's say, you named it, I think in your model, it would be like saboteur. Instead of me having to convince this one to calm down and this one to kind of come up, what's happening is we're building relationships between self and these parts, and then being able to go to the part that holds the wound that gets these ones to actually do what they're doing and heal that up.
Mm. Mhm.
And then
That's
that one
interesting.
spouts back to its fun-loving self, and then there's nothing to protect against anymore. This
Mhm.
is, you don't need a prison guards if there's no more prisoners,
Right,
right?
right, right. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that's really interesting. That kind of reminds me, it's like I started talking about the via character strengths and then we kind of got off on a tangent. But
yeah,
one of the connections that I wanted to make there is that the saboteurs in the positive intelligence language, what the saboteurs do is cause an overuse or underuse of your strengths. So, for example, I mentioned earlier that I have a strong hyper rational saboteur, right? So I like to
yeah.
intellectualize things. Well, one of my top strengths is love of learning from the via character strengths.
Hmm.
Innately, I'm curious. Innately, I love to learn about things, how things are, why things are, right? All of those things. So what happens is that when I get triggered by my hyper-rational saboteur, it creates an overuse of my love of learning. So I can get distracted. I can spend too much time going down a rabbit hole. I can overvalue intellectual knowledge over other things. That is the positive intelligence perspective of the role of the how the saboteurs negatively impact us is by creating like this overuse
Okay.
of a strength that you have, right? In psychology, it's called the golden mean when you are able to use your strengths in the most positive way, not being overused or underused. Yeah, and the saboteurs also create an underuse of a strength. So, um, for example, there's a saboteur, the avoider, right? Of avoiding things. So, if the avoider is going to underuse, let's say, someone who has a strength of humor, then the avoider is going to rationalize away being funny by imposing thoughts about shame, right? Shame, embarrass, don't embarrass yourself. You're always so, just avoiding situations where you are attracted to because you have a natural strength of wanting to engage in things that are fun and you want to apply yourself and bring humor to things, but your avoider is now causing
Okay.
an underuse. So so that's a little bit of how that works in the positive intelligence
In the IFS
world.
lens, all of
Mhm.
those different pieces that you're talking about would
Mhm.
be typically would be a different part.
Mm-hmm.
So, like when I heard that, it was you have one that's really hyper rational, a hyper rational part that is trying to make sense of everything and make sure that, this is what makes sense and that this is to basically protect you.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also another part that loves to learn. When I listen to that or hear it, it could or could not be, but that sounds like two different parts. And then what they're typically doing is they are going active because there's another part under there that's holding some kind of wound.
Mm.
The wound, I don't know, it could be grief, it could be shame, I'm not good enough, or so on. So guess what? I'm going to hyper rationalize all these things. So what would happen in like an IFS or parts kind of framework is to not necessarily pathologize and say, okay, you're good or bad or anything like that. No judgment. It's just get to know them better. Because if you actually asked the parts, they will tell you, like this one that's hyper rational, say, Robin, I've been with you since 4 years old when your mother did this and so on. And because we hyper rationalized out of it, I've been doing this job nonstop forever. I get zero like appreciation, but I'm working around the clock. And my intention is only to help you. And it has no idea on the impacts. And then the other one, which is I want to learn, the same thing. Hey, 3 years old, this is what happened. I start to learn. And then when those get heard and seen and validated and so on, they can soften their own intensity on their own. And then the one that holds the pain, which is, and that's the hard thing about a child, right? Like I could be yelling at somebody out the window of my car, but my child doesn't know that they think I'm yelling at them when they're young, right?
Mm.
So now it becomes, oh, something's wrong. I am bad, right? And then whenever that feeling comes up, which is painful, then the other one's got to kind of jump in. A lot of parts going on there.
It's interesting because when I was young, I always thought that I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to be I love teaching people. I was like always the, summer fun counselor, right? I would always volunteer to be the summer fun counselor. I enjoyed getting kids to interact with each other in a fun way. I've always enjoyed that. But when I went to the University of Oregon in Eugene and
I did too.
oh yeah?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
91 to 93. Oh, I lasted 2 years. That's about it
Uh-huh.
over there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm older than you.
Oh.
But I think my first declared major was actually computer science. That's the hyper-rational, analytical part of me. But anyway, back then, this was in the early 80s, computer science back then was about programming. Not my cup of tea. So I ended up changing my major to psychology. But I didn't like that either because I didn't enjoy learning about the disorders.
Like the DSM.
I didn't enjoy learning about the problem, the dark side of
The pathologization of
yes, I didn't. Yeah, I
somebody.
didn't. Right, I didn't. I
Yeah.
didn't enjoy that part, and so I ended up going into communications. But I've always had an interest. I've always been one who enjoyed personal development. I remember back when Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People came out, and they were touring the country with workshops and
That
stuff.
was
And
right around then.
yeah, I would go to those, and I've always been interested in personal development. And so sales for me was kind of a natural profession to get into because I enjoyed helping people solve problems, helping people find solutions, right? Talking to people, having relationships. But, so in a way, I kind of wish that I found coaching earlier because I think that right now, I'm having the time of my life. I really enjoy what I'm doing. It's evolving. I started my practice in April 2020, right when the pandemic hit. And I actually wondered if I should hold off because of the timing of things. But I thought, no, let's just see what happens, right? And it actually was the best time to start my practice because we were in a 2 weeks to flatten the curve mode. Everybody was at home. And I just
High demand.
Well, I didn't even know, right? I just said, so I was in the 2004 class of the Pacific Century Fellows. And so I just
Oh, you just
sent
before
an
me.
email out and I just
I
said,
saw it.
you saw it?
Yeah, because I'm
Oh,
I'm
you're
05. Yeah.
okay. Yeah. And that's what I did. I just said, who wants free coaching? Right. I just thought I'll just put it out there, give away 3 sessions to people. I had like 12 people respond and I had an uptake of 12 clients right away. And then so I did the free sessions and it was a good way for me to get into becoming like a coach and embodying that for real, and all of this stuff. And more than half of them continued on with paid coaching. And it was really from there. And, talk about strategic, right? So Pacific Century Fellows, they're all leaders. These are all people who are like in that sweet spot of my niche of doing executive coaching. And so more than half of them continued on with paid coaching. And then from there is how I started to grow my practice. And now I'm working with organizations. So it's been a very exciting evolution, but the work itself is it's just so satisfying. I'm like in alignment, right? With
Mhm.
with my purpose, my calling. I want to be a part of the light. I want to be a part of human flourishing. I want to be a part of people experiencing the very best life that they can possibly experience. And that's a choice in a way. That the experience that we have in our life is in a way a choice of how we navigate through it. And so I just really want to help people do that because I've had a lot of people help me.
That's cool.
Hmm.
Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you wanted to mention?
I have a relationship with Hawaii Pacific Neuroscience. And as a board certified health and wellness coach, one of the things that the industry itself is working on is getting health and wellness coaching covered by insurance. But right now, you may be able to use your health savings account or FSA money to cover health and wellness coaching. It's got to be acknowledged by a physician. So if you're under a lot of stress or if you're maybe caregiving and you can get your doctor to say, I think Evan will benefit from health and wellness coaching for whatever. I have documentation from the national board that says that this is recognized as a qualifying expense for your FSA or HSA. But the industry itself is working on we do have CPT codes for insurance coverage, but it's getting the insurance companies to recognize it and reimburse on it. So that's still a work in progress. Mm.
Well, cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I wanted to acknowledge you. Anybody who takes care of their parents or others, I understand how hard that is personally. So that and with your coaching to help others, it's pretty exciting. So thank
Thank you,
you so much
Evan.
for coming.
Thank you, Evan. This has been fun. Great to be here.
If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.